today. Glad that you're here with us. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn over to Jonah chapter 4. Let's go to God. Father God in heaven, God, we thank you. We thank you, God, for the opportunity to open up your word, the words of life, God, that help us and teach us to know, as it says, when to say no to ungodliness, but yes to godliness. God, give us the understanding, God, to know that we don't need to know all the answers, Father, but that the answers are right here in our presence. So God, open our hearts, open our minds, allow us to hear and see your answers. Thank you. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. I want to tell you about a Swedish theologian. His name was Nels. N-E-L-S. And born about 1908. His family sent him off to America to find his future. And his dad was a minister, and so the family was all there with all the big hopes and dreams they had for him there at the train station. They all circled up and huddled around him and prayed for him and just wished the best for him. All these things. And as he goes to get on the train and it starts to build up the steam going down the track, his mother runs to the window where she sees him sitting at it and raising her hand trying to get his attention. So he opens up the window and she shouts out the words, "Remember Jesus." Remember Jesus. Let's go to Jonah chapter 4. Well, chapter 3 ends with what? The destruction that was to possibly come upon Nineveh if they did not turn from their evil ways. God has relented. And I love how chapter 4 begins. But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "O Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? That is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." But the Lord replied, "Have you any right to be angry?" Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord provided a vine and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort. And Jonah was very happy about the vine. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed the vine so that it withered. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die and said, "It would be better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you have a right to be angry about the vine?" "I do," he said. "I am angry enough to die." But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city?" We talked last week, and the statement was that we made is we wish chapter 3 was the last chapter of Jonah. Right? That's the Hollywood in me. That's the story that you sit there and say that, Jonah finally went. He finally obeyed. He finally got it. He goes to Nineveh, and this message is spread throughout, and they all turn, and they live happily ever after, right? You've got this imagery. But then chapter 4 begins that three-letter word, but. But Jonah was displeased and became angry. And I think back to this problem that we see in the beginning of this book with Jonah. Jonah had a heart. Jonah had, I don't know, this deep-seated anger, whether it was something that happened to him directly or happened to family of his, or he was just continually delivering these messages from God about being able to survive in this world where Nineveh and Assyria are continuing to torture you, but press on. And so now finally he has this opportunity to go tell them. This is what happens when you mess with God's people. Right? This is what you get for all that you have done. And we even see the reason why he didn't go, right? Because he knew God was compassionate. He knew that God was a God of grace. And that God might forgive them. And Jonah didn't want them to be forgiven. He didn't want them to experience the compassion of God. Jonah made that choice. Jonah made that determination. One of the themes that comes up here in chapter 4 is that word provided. Right? It begins back in chapter 2, or even in chapter 1, where God provided this great wind. And I guess he provided the opportunity for Jonah to throw himself overboard, right? And then he provides this great fish. Well, and in chapter 3, he finally provides him with the opportunity to deliver God's message. His message, let's be honest, his message of salvation, of grace, of forgiveness. And so we see throughout this idea of the then and now of godly interruptions in your life. That then this happens and now God calls you to this. Or then you find yourself in this situation and now God delivers you from this. And just think about all these things that Jonah has experienced just in this small little glimpse that we have into his life. About what happens that God does for those who are disobedient to him. Maybe not in all their life, but just in a glimpse of their life, in just a moment of their life, what God is willing to provide them. To free them from what may seem like just this eternal situation of death. Sitting in, I don't know if he was sitting, standing, pacing, whatever, in this belly of the great fish. Knowing this is the end. And God provides a way out. And so we think, yes, then Jonah finally goes to Nineveh. He finally listens. He finally gets it, is what we're led to believe, right? And he teaches out of what he knows, right? You turn from these foreign gods, you put God first in your life. Guess what will happen? God relents, does not destroy them. All is well. Jonah was displeased. And not just displeased, it says Jonah became angry. He became angry. He did not think that they deserved what God had given. He did not believe that even the words that he said that God put on his heart and spoke through his mouth to this group of people, over 120,000 people, that it caused so much torture and so much stress and so many problems for God's people, were worthy of God's forgiveness. You know what he says? Their sin is greater than my sin. What they've done, well, what I've done is fine. I just tried to run away from him. I just tried to ignore him. Let's back up a bit. If you live in the disobedience to God, are you not ignoring God? Are you not ignoring His ways? Are you not ignoring His commands? Now, we can't say that they did not have the opportunity to know, right? They went in and occupied an area where God's people lived. They had a chance to know. They chose to ignore. And so what Jonah is saying is what they've done to our people, right? He starts taking some ownership. What they've done to our people, your people, my people, this is unforgivable. And so we determine in our hearts, like Jonah, and we start deciding who is worthy of receiving God's promise. And the sad thing is we sit back and we say, how in the world could Jonah do? And what do we do? We may not do it the exact same way, but we do the same. Now you say, well, no, I didn't say they were not worthy of God's forgiveness. I did not say they were not worthy of His salvation. Did you go and tell them? Did you go and speak to them? Did you go and teach them about God? Did you go and teach them about His love? I challenge you to ask yourself the question, what's the reason you didn't? What helped you decide to not go talk to a certain person? Was because of what they've done? Because of what they've done to you or done to a family member, or how they treated you, how they badmouthed you, or what you saw them doing? Something led to that decision. Yes, sometimes it just comes down to the fact that we just don't want to know. That's a different discussion for another time, right? Matter of fact, we're talking about that on Wednesday nights in the series on discipleship. This idea of as you go, teach. As you go, lead. Somewhere along the way, we make that decision why we do not want to go, or why we go in a way that it's, yeah, I'll tell them. They ain't gonna listen. What difference is it going to make if I tell them? Right? And so in our minds we start going over this. And so what happens when you find yourself before someone that you don't want to tell, having to tell them a message that you believe is for you and not for them? Are you telling it in a loving way? Are you telling it in a way that you've got this excitement, this passion about you, and that you're excited about the opportunity that you're going to now share this with them? No. It's going to be one of those, all right, here's what you need to do. All right. Here we go. Let me tell you about what you're doing, what you need to stop doing. All right? Okay, we'll see you later. Right? And you tell them that, and you know, for the longest time in this book of Jonah, we see this message. Jonah goes down to Joppa. Jonah goes down to Tarshish. Finally, in chapter 3, he goes up to Nineveh. Then in chapter 4, he goes up to get a viewpoint to see the destruction. Not believing in what he just said. Shocked when God followed through on His promise. Just appalled at the fact, became angry, displeased that God did what He said He would do. Just think about that for a second. Wrap your mind around that. Jonah was angry that God fulfilled His promise. Turn from their ways. I will relent. God fulfilled His promise. Think about this, Matthew 10:14. Whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Hosea 13:4. I will deliver this people from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, are your plagues? Where, O grave, is your destruction? I will have no compassion. Colossians 3:12. Put on them as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. And we look at all this. After Jonah gives all this message, Jonah seemed this was very wrong and became evil. Someone who knows God's Word knows His promises, knows, the Pentateuch, as when they would go around and teach, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, this promise of God's deliverance, His reminder that God will redeem those who are His chosen ones, right? And begins to teach us what it means to worship Him, what it means to serve Him only. And Jonah delivers this message for a living. He is a prophet of God. And he goes to a group of people that he determined were not worthy to receive it. He delivers it anyway. And he goes up on the side of a mountain and waits. Let's see what happens. Wait till they get what they're going to get, right? I can't wait to see how they receive their reward. Yeah, I told them. God doesn't know these people like I do. I've seen what they're capable of. Right? And it sounds just so absurd when we say it to ourselves like that. But these are the things that seems to be going on in Jonah's mind. I know them better than God knows them. They are not worthy to receive the salvation. Put on Christ. Receive His salvation, but you're not worthy. Clothe yourselves with Christ, but you're not worthy. You live in such a way God will not destroy, but you're not worthy. See, much of the way we speak to people, one of the things that helps us to be the most effective as we speak to people, whether it's giving a glass of water, whether it's helping those who are thirsty, who are hungry, who are sick, who are in need, it's the attitude. The attitude of the heart. The attitude of the mind. Not going begrudgingly, but going because God has done something amazing in our life. That God has changed. He has changed our reward. That due to our actions led to death. But now we have the opportunity of life, he says. And when we go and we teach people this way, we don't then go up on a mountainside. We don't then go up and get a good view, right? Because the walls of Nineveh are so high, he had to get to a good vantage point so he could see and so he can watch how they're going to be destroyed. No. If anything, we sit back and see how great our God is. We're reminded that yes, God is a compassionate God. God is a gracious God, abounding in love. Although we see that Jonah became angry, it says he is slow to anger. See, he says in John 15:9, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. The lesson for Jonah, the lesson for us, is that as we go, yes, we may have some experiences that were not the greatest of experiences of the people that we're going to talk to. But you see, it's not about those experiences. It's about abiding in His love. About remaining in Him. About knowing that when God calls us to go, that the attitude that we go to reach out to people, that it's not about going to someone and say, all right, now let me tell you about how your life is on the way to heaven. Right? No. It's let me tell you about the God who can provide you something that you never thought imagined. Let me tell you about the God who came to give life. Nels, when he became older, that Swedish theologian who told you about, as he got older in his life, he was teaching actually at a Bible college. As he got older, he began to experience this rheumatoid arthritis, much to the point that he could hardly walk. He could hardly move. And two students took it upon themselves to help provide this transportation for him, right? And so he could go almost straight from his classroom to a car and then go to his house. Well, as time went on, he kept telling his students, move the car further away. They were a little shocked by what he would say. So they listened. And as time continued to go on, he just kept saying, move the car further. See, what this man taught us is that, yes, as his body was failing, as he was able to make it to the car every time, as he was able to, even in the midst of all this pain, still go on every day, God he was not cured from this, but he experienced a healing that only comes in the name of Jesus. A healing that is only found in the name of Jesus that leads us to life. And we're reminded of what his mother said as she ran up to the window. Remember Jesus. You see, when we remember Jesus, a tough message to a tough group of people, it's not so tough. Because when we remember Jesus, remember what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to free those who were bound to that penalty of death. Jesus came to give life. Jesus came to give eternal life. A healing that this world cannot offer. Because you see, in the end, Nels was healed. When he passed from this life, he experienced healing, eternal life. But the struggle we experience is the struggle that Jonah experienced. When we forget Jesus, when we forget what Jesus came to do, when we forget what Jesus' purpose was in coming to this world, well, when those who live in disobedience to God turn to Him, we become displeased and angry because they're not worthy to receive that message. But you see, it's not up to us. It's not up to us to decide who is worthy. It's up to us to go. It's up to us to teach. It's up to us to lead, to show, and to reflect, be a mirror image of God's compassion, of God's grace, of God's abounding love. And so as you go, let us go with the attitude of those who have been called by His name, those who have been clothed with Christ, those who know what it means that when we help someone in their time of need, that as Jesus said, when you helped them, you were helping. Those who know that it's not about choosing when and how, but that we go. And who knows? As the king of Nineveh said, who knows? God may yet relent. And He may provide us not destruction, but hope, grace, and forgiveness. Do you want to change the world we live in? Go with the attitude of the Savior. Go with His love. Go with His grace. Go with His compassion. And most importantly, go. Let's not leave it up to someone else. Let's not sit and wait and see what God has in store. Let's be excited about what God is doing. About what God can do. This is what God teaches us from the book of Jonah. This is what God wants us to know. See, the challenge is this. We have to look inside us. We have to look in here, and we have to look in here. It's all about our mind and our heart, right? ourselves and getting ourselves in tune with God. I wish that every day we were able to make the statement, everything I did for the sake of Jesus. But you know, we have those days that we decide they don't need to hear it. I do it too. I'm not talking to just you, I'm talking to me. Let's become in tune with God in such a way that we desire to share His saving message with all of creation. And let us abide in His love. Let us lead the world to see the Father. Let us lead the world to know the Father and to serve Him and to serve Him only. Because what? There is one God, one Father, one Lord, one baptism. There is one way, it says, for us to go to heaven, and that is through Jesus the Son. And let us not determine in our hearts who is worthy of receiving this message. Let us go in understanding that all are lost without Jesus. Let us go and lead a world that is dying, that is in need of hope. And let us show them what God has done through us, what God has done for us, so that the world that we live in, and not just now, but in the generations come, and generations to come until Jesus returns, that we will have a world that puts God first. That we will have a world that worships God, that worships Him only, and that anytime somebody comes in and says, no, this is the way you do it, and you say, no, I know who my God is, I am confident in Him, and I will worship Him till the day that I die. Let's create a world that knows God that way, and then I guarantee you, the world that we live in will be a better place. It will be a place that we will want to raise children, generations. Maybe you need to make a reflection today and see the changes that you need to make in your life. Well, the God that we serve, the God that we worship, He can do great things through you. But you got to put Him first. Maybe today is the day that you are clothed with Him and put Him on as your Savior. Whatever you decide. Can we do it now? Let's do it now as we say this.